Hi, guys. Welcome to Freedom Talk. Good to be with you today. And I have a special guest. It's Dr. Mark Sherwood of the Functional Medical Institute. He and his wife, Michelle, run this great business that, among other things, gives people personalized wellness plans. I got to meet Mark in Tulsa at one of Clay Clark's events. So I'm going to talk to Dr. Mark Sherwood. It's going to be a great talk. Welcome to Freedom Talk. Mark, it's really good to see you again.
Kelly, it's good to be here, man. Thanks for having me on Freedom Talk. I've been looking forward to this, so I'm honored to be with you today.
Well, we're honored to have you. And I was looking up some of your biographical information. Hard to believe now looking at you because you're ripped, but you said that you were the chubby kid, and in school I was the skinny kid. And I think, you know, having, you might say body issues are being picked on because of your size, either direction. It can be a real incentive to hit the gym. And I know after college, I put on 50 pounds of muscle. I was really skinny.
Yeah,
But
probably
you were,
the same way. I just was not the the real athletic kid. I mean, I had good athletic ability, but if
yeah,
you have body issues, you don't like yourself too much, and so
yeah. But
I
you went on to become a professional bodybuilder and
yeah,
play pro baseball, and then you were on the Tulsa Police Department for 24 years, including,
yeah,
was it 10 years as a SWAT member?
that's right. Yes.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that and how you feel about law enforcement in this moment in time.
Well, I mean, look, I look back on my life, Kelly, and I went into law enforcement to protect and serve. It's just it, and protection to me meant to protect people from themselves, to protect people from bad people who were trying to
Yeah.
commit crimes on them, and even to protect the Constitution. Service was to go out there and serve my fellow man with my life if need be. That
Yeah.
was my definition. I don't know what other people's are, but that was mine. And I went into it with that. I remember clearly well when I took that oath that first day back in, seems like a long time ago, 1989. I remember these words, with my life if need be. And I remember speaking those words out while thinking about what they meant. And it meant clearly that you were willing to sacrifice your life if need be for a cause that was bigger than yours. So those people in law enforcement that are really in law enforcement for that reason, with that heart, with that calling, with that mission, in my mind, they're heroes. And they should be classified as that, because who are you going to call when you're getting robbed? Who are you going to call? You're going to call the police, and police officers, generally agents, whatever, they run at bullets. They don't run away from it. Timeless SWAT team was hard, rewarding, learned a lot, saw a lot. It changes you, man. I mean, I remember one situation very quickly that I experienced that really shocked me, because we were in a hostage situation, and the sniper at the time, and I was a sniper later, but I was on the ground at this point in time. The sniper entered the situation, stopped it, right? I think y'all know what I'm talking about. But I was the first person with my machine gun trained on that guy, as he laid there. And remember the weather that evening it was a nighttime, probably in the 50s or 40s, because you could see your breath, right?
Yeah.
And remember seeing his chest rise up and his breath came out, and I saw the breath come out, and that was it. Wow. And I watched that man take his last. And so it has been something that I've put into my think tank for a long, long time. Life is short. Decisions we make can be critical at all times. They can cost you your life, or they can earn you a few years. And so I really try to live my life since then is a way that is, I don't know, unique, and done my best to try to teach that value to people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would love sometime to have you back and talk more about your law enforcement experience. And I have to say, I'm really impressed with these guys at the FBI who come forward as whistleblowers. And, I know one of them said, look, I can't do the things that they're asking me to do because I swore an oath to the Constitution. I held a minor political office years ago, and I swore the oath too. So, my life is on the line for my country and my community. I would give it for my country. None of us wants to think about doing that, but I know that when you're in law enforcement, that is a daily thing that you face. So thank you. I don't mean to sound cliche, but thank you for your years of service.
Well, I appreciate that. It really does make a person feel good to be appreciated. And like you said, I mean, even my time in law enforcement, I was able to work 3 years in internal affairs. So I understand the guts and the courage it took to come forward. And frankly, any leader of any organization is going to want that if they really want excellence. And, I would hope Director Ray wants that as well. That's what I would hope.
Yeah. So we're at this point after this long event with COVID-19.
Yeah.
I worked for a medical education company when this first came out. I was researching and writing peer-reviewed articles, so I have some, I'd say, informed opinions on it. It's very interesting, everything that's coming out. Epic Times, who I work with, is breaking a lot of interesting things. But I know you're working with people with their health, with getting them back into health. I think it's more important now than ever. But could you tell us a little bit about your business?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. My wife, Dr. Michelle, and I, who you've met, I like to refer to her as not just my spare rib, but my prime rib. She's amazing.
Right.
We work together. We have 4 other practitioners that we mentor and teach, and they're incredible. Large staff, but our whole mission, Kelly, is to lead people on a pathway of true healing. And to do that, there are 7 entities with which we really address within the human being: exercise, sleep, nutrition, stress management, genetics, hormones, peptides. And we really want to make sure all those 7 areas are really constructed properly. And then within that framework, we deal with that sort of roll over the top of that, the emotional and spiritual component. So it really is a linkage between spiritual, emotional, physical. And we see people get better. I mean, we see diseases reversed. We see people get de-prescribed. It's a good journey, and we've been very fortunate and I would say successful. Praise the Lord to with COVID-19 people. It has not been something we've been concerned about. We haven't treated it as like, oh my God, it's like chill out, calm down, want a hug. It was like, I don't care. It was like, and they've got better. It's been good.
Well, yeah, it's shocking to me because, as you're well aware, the CDC, World Health Organization, and others, they never emphasized fitness, health, diet, all of those things, which really are the best defense against, I think, many, if not most diseases. In fact, they closed the gyms. You and I think both know Ian Smith, who had a gym, and some others, and they were making the point of, hey, people need to be coming in here. They need to be working out. They need to be healthy. And so tell me a little bit about that, your thoughts on that approach, and what's wrong with medicine these days. I mean, where do we start? But I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I do have a lot of thoughts on that, because I go back and look at history. History always unravels the mystery. And so we saw this thing began back in the early 1900s when Rockefeller and Carnegie kind of hijacked the idea of healers like myself, like my wife, like chiropractors. My wife's an osteopath, by the way. And they saw an opportunity to profit from petroleum-based pharmaceutical products. And they did. They began to fund that, and money began to drive that bus of education, and everybody else was considered a quack or a whack job. Now, unfortunately, as we all know today, we have a country, and this is where I absolutely 1,000% blame our government. And I'm going to just lay it out here. We have had our government allow Big Pharma to advertise directly to the citizens of these United States. Completely unacceptable. I mean, it's like advertising to our children, for God's sake. Yeah. We in this government have passed bills and legislation to make drugs cheap. I mean, come on. What is that? We in this government have allowed the subsidies of food that's not food at all. That's created genetically modified organisms that were made cheaper so that you and I would be encouraged to eat poor food, to become in bondage to big government, in bondage to big food, in bondage to big pharma. And we're seeing obesity rise out of control and diet. I mean, we have done such a poor job. And now the physician education is driven by the money, driven by Big Pharma, and Big Pharma drives that bus. And so it's a battle. I did not see anyone back in March 2020 from the government, from church, from medicine. I saw nobody talk about this. We did. Kelly, we went hardcore at these comorbidities we hear about so much, you know, the obesity, the type 2 diabetes, the hypertension or high blood pressure. We went at those things because we knew they were risk factors. And we thought, okay, if we eliminate the risk factors, that eliminates the risk, right? Or it lowers the risk. That was just common sense. And so that was the approach we did. And I throw this kind of question back at you just for like wonder, what would have happened? What could have happened if we as America would have had leaders that talked about how to really care for and make sure the people of this nation were healthy, right?
Yeah.
What would have happened when COVID was invented, right? Nothing. Big fat nothing. We would have been the benchmark, the beacon of hope for the entire world. And now we're the laughingstock. And it's our current governments, because they need to get their head out of the sand and their you-know-whats air. Straight up opinion.
I had a really interesting conversation online back at that time. Someone was talking about Japan having a low mortality rate. And they said, oh, it's because they wear masks.
Oh.
And I said, no, that is not even, that's junk science, if you're even calling it science. They eat a lot of fish there. Their diet is very different than ours. Their rates of obesity are different. And it was interesting because I had someone enter the conversation who I forget if they were Japanese or had lived there or both. But they said, there are a lot of factors, and it's not because they wore masks. So unfortunately, I still see people who are so afraid. We saw someone the other day wearing one in their car, and I don't like to ridicule them. It's more like I want to deliver them from bondage, because, and you're right. If the healthy people generally did great, and it was the overweight, the diabetic, and the very elderly who were in the main risk groups.
Yeah, it's been interesting how the conversation has been flipped around, and we have a lot of people that come to us, for example, that are type 2 diabetic and say, man, I heard you guys can get that reversed. Well, the answer is yes. Frankly, quite honestly, and 1,000% certain, type 2 diabetes should not exist in one single person within the world. It's been created because of the lifestyle we have right now. That's a fact. People can take that to the bank. It's interesting how people that are healthy were healthy during the pandemic, that was never a pandemic, but people that were healthy were demonized because they were healthy. They were taught like they're a weirdo. You, Kelly Walker, you, Mark Sherwood, are super carriers because you're not healthy. You're not buckling down and getting hiding by everybody. So you become a bad person. And the poor people that are type 2 diabetic, you're hurting them. Well, okay, so let's flip it around. The type 2 diabetic, unfortunately, either ignorantly or rebelliously or just by choice, they're doing things that are creating the disease. I look at love like this. Greater love has no man than this, and he laid down his life for his friends. We talked about that. The second principle is this. Faithful are the wounds of friends, but the kisses of the enemy are deceitful. Now, what does that mean? It means if you love somebody, you're going to tell them the truth to give them a chance to get better, even if it hurts.
Yeah.
If you tell them what they want to hear, you're just hurting them even more. And we've seen a lot of that, haven't we? We've seen a lot of absolute hatred for fear of offending somebody. And to me, that's a lack of courage and a lack of love.
Yeah. And, it's been more than just offense. It's people get violent. I literally had to bodily defend my teenage son at one point because the guy got in his face in a Home Depot. I had to step between him and push this kid, and it's just, it's crazy. And, I'm not a doctor. I am a scientist, and I trained a lot in microbiology. My patient, you might say, was the soil and plants and that kind of thing. But I have enough of a background and especially with the job that I was working, to really have some good insight on this. And what I experienced was I would go onto social media, and you're lost in this just cacophony of voices, and a lot of them aren't even correct. They're just parroting things from the news. But even, trying to bring science forward, and I brought home, put up some graphs and statistics from work. People didn't want to see it. They wanted to call you names and yell at you. I'd never seen anything like it before.
Yeah, I me neither. I've seen more violence in the last couple of years than I've cared to see in my entire life. But honestly, the way I look at it, and this is just straight up sciencey, like, as you know, we are made from the dirt.
Mhm.
And so there is a synergistic relationship that we have with the dirt and everything that's in the dirt. And you go back to look at our microbiota, we're we got 100 times more bacteria DNA than we do human DNA. Now, that's a mind blower for a moment. But even with our ability to live with viruses, let's even go back and say, okay, if we believe God created the earth, if we believe that and everything in the earth, then we have to believe that a coronavirus, every form of it, was also created by God. So therefore, if that's true, then God wouldn't put you in the earth so that earth could overtake you with something more powerful, because we as humans are the greatest creation. So if that's true, then we believe the human body has the ability, with its amazing system called the immune system, which is like your incredibly intricate defenders that just cover your borders everywhere, internally and externally.
Yeah.
That system would have the ability to adapt accordingly to anything in the earth to overcome it and create a defense to it. And so when we saw this going on, our mission, our job was just simply to ensure that the cells at the basic cellular level, from the mitochondria, DNA, and everything of those organelles in there, had everything they need to exist and function appropriately. And our theory was that if we did that, then the cells, which produce tissues, which produce organs, which produce organ system, which produce the organism, would have everything they need to function as organism in a healthy way, to not just survive, but to thrive. And that's the kind of idea that I was hoping science would bring forth, but we just seem to go backwards in that, Kelly.
Yeah, I see a little difference between the masks and face shields and these big bird beaks that you saw in the Middle Ages. And, I was just reading a book set in the time of the American Revolution, and how many people died and kids died, and, the lifespan was lower. You'd have a baby and wonder if it was going to survive. But in my view, it was more about sanitation and education than it was about whether or not the immune system worked. And I think the fact that some people were able to live in those filthy conditions and still be okay is a testament to the immune system. Yes. But I know I had heard some time ago that during the Black Plague, the Jews received some persecution because they didn't succumb to it as much as everyone else did. And they were accused of poisoning the wells and things. But it was really because they had the cleanliness laws from the Old Testament. So I think sometimes people say, well, if it hadn't been for vaccines, we'd be seeing people drop like flies. I think some vaccines have been great, like smallpox vaccine, but I don't think what we have right now are vaccines. I think they're something different. What do you think about that?
I do concur. I think the mentality or the mindset probably of those invented vaccines like smallpox and polio, things like that, I don't feel like they were in a bad intent, is because it probably did save some lives. Honestly, it probably did save a lot of heartaches too. But when the vaccine liability was transferred from the vaccine manufacturers, the United States government back in the mid 80s, I believe under the Reagan administration, we saw the average, and don't quote me on this, but I'm generally in the ballpark. Before that, there were 5 vaccines given to children under 2. After that, within a year, it went up to over 20 within the 2 years. And again, you don't see the U.S. government paying out class action lawsuits for vaccine injuries. You see the vaccine manufacturers having carte blanche liability protection. And that's why you see people like Bill Gates, like Anthony Fauci, like some of these people that are making all kinds of dollars on this thing, We see them investing into these patents of these vaccines so they can profit from that. And so today we're over-vaccinated, undereducated, completely unhealthy. And so we're depending on the wrong things, to your point, to keep us well and keep us from dying too early. We are depending on everything except the wonderful technology that is the human being that was created by the hand of God. And so we've done everything kind of the opposite. And even, this current mRNA idea. I mean, on one hand, you can see why they're trying to do that, to create the right tissues, that cells create the proteins. It goes from the DNA to the RNA and out towards the proteins to create the tissues. That's the way it's supposed to work. But they also knew at the same time there was reverse transcriptase, which would actually take the mRNA technology. It would go backwards and alter the DNA. They knew that.
Yeah.
The question is, why? And that's what blows my mind is, why did they do that? And then when I look back at Operation Warp Speed, which, I look back at that as a catastrophic failure, because why would you rush that type of technology that has never been rolled out to this population across the earth before? Why would you do that, knowing full well that you might have consequences that might be negative?
And it was all based on false premises. When this Imperial College London, not even study, just projection came out saying that, millions of people were going to die. Right. I told my wife right away, I said, this is absolutely ludicrous. This isn't even possible. I saw right away the flaws in it. And a lot of this approach was predicated on those dire predictions. And then they were proven false. They were proven faked and fudged. And yet they didn't amend the approach. They didn't change the approach. They acted as if we were still expecting, millions of people in the U.S. to die. And
they even took those numbers, and even when the people that didn't die, they put the credit on the vaccines. It's like they've taken it 3 steps deep. And like you, when I heard that too, I was like, I'm not going to live in fear. Fear is not something I live by. That's not, wait a minute. What are we doing? And people, you have to sort of filter out fear through that filter of reality. Fear is this: false evidence appearing real. That's what that is. I mean, I know what fear is because, I've been shot at before. That's fear. That's really happening. But when I leave work and I'm home, I'm not getting shot at. But if I'm still living in the idea of getting shot at, you can see how the body responds the same, and my decision making would be the same. So our decision making was not well thought out at that time from a rational standpoint, and we did act on fear. And anytime you act upon fear irrationally, you're going to have a bad result.
Yeah, the fight or flight kicks in, and it makes it harder to think and process. One thing that really blew my mind was when people were downplaying natural immunity, because traditionally the whole purpose of a vaccine is to stimulate your natural immunity. So this idea that a vaccine was superior to your natural immunity was utter nonsense to talk about that.
It was. And I remember one Anthony Fauci saying, this has been 8 or 9 years ago. They had him on tape, right? He said, the greatest immunity or inoculation you can get is infection. Okay, so my question is this, Kelly. We had this all this time. And even the guy we were trusting, who should have been fired, by the way, in my opinion, because of the way he was communicating that to the American people. It was fear-based, which was not good as a leadership standpoint. And I've been very critical of that. That same guy was taped earlier saying exactly what you just said, that natural immunity is obtained best, most optimally by infection, which creates the best inoculation. Why was that not rolled out until now? It's like everything you look at right now, you have to question it. And that's why the mainstream media have not been responsible journalists, in my opinion, because they've not been unbiased, presented both sides. They've been very manipulated by advertisement dollars, by big pharma and by big lobbyists, which controls big government.
Yeah, you see all the news shows sponsored by Pfizer and all those kind of things. And somehow something that should have been scientifically analyzed, and also we have a natural right to make our own healthcare decisions ultimately. Somehow that got politicized and it became a two-class society. If you're not wearing this mask, if you're not taking this jab, you're a bad person. If you do, you're a good person. And yet I'm seeing these serious reservations that people have had bearing out. I mean, people are
Yeah.
falling over dead from myocarditis and different things. I mean, what are you seeing there? What are the effects that you're seeing as a doctor?
Well, what I'm seeing is a couple things. There's a lot of information out there that is worthy of investigation because it's incredible accuracy of observation. You're right. There's been an uptick in this cases of myocarditis, especially in the young. Boom. We know that there is unexplained deaths, more current right now that seem to relate to taking a vaccine from clots. Right. So you see all this stuff happening, and even then, I am hard pressed, just from a scientific, reasonable standpoint, to say this causes that, because I can't say that, because if you say that this causes that, then this must cause that every time, right? It's like the old adage goes, do smoking cigarettes, does that create cancer? We can't say yes because it doesn't create cancer in everybody. Hence the label on the back of the cigarette cartons say may cause cancer. So there's a may in there. And so I look at it like from a totality of the circumstances, and I want to look at everything around that. What could also contribute to that negative outcome? And those would be things like genetics. I mean, we test genetics. I know what people's genetics are. I understand the way they're going to respond typically to environmental cues. We have to look at current physiology or current pathology of the human being. Are they obese? Are they type 2 diabetic? Do they have blood sugar issues? Do they have vascular issues, right? Et cetera, et cetera. Do they smoke? Are they sedentary? All this. And so all of these things should be factored into that potential contribution bucket. And so it's going to be hard. I was asked recently on a broadcast if we were ever going to be able to determine if the mRNA vaccine causes condition A. And my answer was, I don't think so, because of all these different factors in there in us as human beings. I mean, even though we're 99.9% identical genetically, we are not identical. So we have different ways in which our bodies respond. So it's going to be hard to say that. But one thing I do know that we should really understand is that when we participate in the standard American Western lifestyle, we've got a 50-year track record on that it's going to be catastrophic results. Because right now we're trending in a way that if you want to bet on something, folks, bet on the obesity crisis, because that is going to grow. We're predicted to be, by the year 2050, by many experts, 100% of the population of the United States of America will be obese or overweight. Further, many experts are predicting, and you talk about being able to think accordingly and what environmental hazards we have. 1 in 2 persons born in the United States in 2050 will be autistic, somewhere on that scale. These are tragic numbers and tragic trends that I think are the elephant in the room that most people don't want to address.
Yeah, and maybe we got it backwards. Maybe the mask should be put on before we eat,
Yeah, I think they can keep us from eating a bowl of cereal, maybe, right?
Yeah. And that is something that's preventable. And I know some people struggle with putting on weight more than others. I'm not desensitized to that, but I think that we all have a responsibility to our families, to society, to do the best we can to live healthy. I wanted to back up a little bit. And this doctor, I might be mispronouncing his name, but Asim Malhotra just came out. It came in on my feed from the Epic Times today. He was pro-vaccine, and now he's warning, hey, put the brakes on, because I'm seeing some problems here. And I remember what I was going to say. I've seen over the last couple of years some very non-scientific words being used, proven, very dogmatic statements. Karl Popper, the philosopher of science, talked about, how you have to be able to falsify things, that it's not so much that you're proving something, you're just constantly putting something to the test and seeing if it
Right.
continues to be the best explanation. But I did find it's interesting that this doctor from England, Indian by nationality, I believe, has said, "Hey, let's slow down." And it was also interesting to me at the end of the article. Guess who was trying to discredit his concerns? Imperial College of London.
Wow. Well, I'm not surprised, because good scientists, good investigators are always putting hypotheses to the test. Hypothesis is just, we think this, we believe this will occur if we do this. And you over the course of time, you prove that, right? And that's how vaccines are done. That's how we should be looking at it. Does this vaccine over the course of time produce a natural immunity? That's the question. The hypothesis was that it did, but how do you really work that hypothesis over the course of time and test it out thoroughly with only 4 months? I mean, it's absurd. And yet we did it anyway. You're right. There's a lot of people that right now from the medical clinician arena that are saying, time out a minute. You pushed hard enough because you thought people were going to die. And now you're realizing, and we're seeing that, I've seen this, that people that are vaccinated more get sick more. I'm talking boosters. Now, I will say we've treated a lot of people, into the 5 figures and beyond at this point with great results. Not all of our population are unvaccinated. We should understand that, right? And the vast majority of them are not, because I've always just been like, hey, man, be fully informed and make your best choices. And I've tried to give them everything I could, everything I knew, right? And we haven't lost anybody yet that's been vaccinated. But I have observed in my tiny little window corner of the world that the ones that do and have gotten vaccinated more, my observation, they've gotten sick more often, and they've had more symptoms more often.
Well, I want to test a theory of mine on you.
Yeah.
And I think a good analogy is the gym, resistance training.
Mm-hmm.
You go in, you have to push against the weights, and it's reaching that point of stress and failure that builds muscle. However, if you had someone coming in constantly spotting you taking some of the weight, you wouldn't grow as well. And the difference I see, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but traditional vaccine, you might say, it works with nature in that it tests your immune system. And like Fauci admitted, getting sick is the best form, because it really strengthens your immune system. So we've co-evolved with these viruses and bacteria for who knows how long, and it's caused us to have robust immune systems. Unfortunately, people who have very weak immune systems, it's the law of nature. They tend to not fare as well. But my concern about the mRNA so-called vaccines is that they become a proxy for your immune system. They're sort of like an overeager spotter that's going to take too much of the weight for you. And it makes me wonder, are those people's immune systems growing flabby and weak?
I love that. I love that analogy, Kelly. I think that's very insightful. And even in the gym, I worked out every day for the most part, and very few days off for, well over 45 years right now. I can tell you that you don't grow muscles without pushing through resistance. It didn't work like that. It has to be progressive. And that's the principles of we have 2 types of immunity: innate immunity, which is passed down directly from your mama, right? Through the breast milk, we get that, and from being around mama, and passing through the vaginal canal, etc. But then we also have this adaptive immunity. Adaptive immunity occurs when we are exposed to things. You go back years and years ago, people that had the chicken pox, they'd have a chicken pox party, hey, I'm coming over, just get over with. Yep. And so you're right. The traditional vaccines would take a little bit of an inert part of that virus that was designed to not be at a level that would create a massive negative response. So in a little small amount, and they would throw it in your system and allow your body to work and adapt, keyword, adapt to that. It would have to adapt to realize I've never faced you before. I need to come up with a way to deal with you now. And I'm going to generate a response called an antibody response. And I'm going to cue that memory in my brain, my immune brain, so that the next time I see anything that looks like you, I've got my tools and I know what to deal with it. And the same is true with weight training, right? When you look at the mRNA, they're using a little bit of a nanoparticle, which is not unusual. That's been around for a long, long time. I've got delivery supplements
to break through that lipid envelope around the
it's out there. So this nanomolecular particle, they cloak it in that little ball of fat and they insert it, and on the edge of cells, the way it works, it's called the cytoplasm, and they're made of phospholipids or fats, and they will go in there, they'll bind to that, and it creates part of that, and your RNA is going to be that computer program, if you will. It's going to be inserted in there to try to get your body to create, in this case, spike proteins from the inside, not from the outside. As opposed to the viral vector is one way I talked about. This is going to be the mRNA. Create spike proteins so that your body's going to have to adjust to your own creation of these spike proteins. And you can see the inherent problem, which is multiple fold. How many spike proteins are we going to create? Can your body adjust? Do the spike proteins creation ever get turned down? And are the spike protein creation, is that really the answer? It turns out, doesn't seem to be the answer, does it? It turns out that the spike protein may be the pathogen that's creating the problem. So we're creating this perpetual bombardment of a pathogenic storm. So, but you're right. It's like taking away the adaptive ability of the body and trying to take charge of that from the outside. And that goes into this idea, and people hate this term, but it's true. This idea of a transhumanism kind of a generation, that's controlled by outside forces. And, man, I can look at it and think, oh, wow, what if we could control cancer that way? But it doesn't work like that. It does not work like that. And so I love that analogy, and I think it provided a lot of color commentary to our discussion today.
Yeah, another thing that occurred to me, and maybe I'm going from college, biology and zoology and all that kind of thing, but I started thinking about they test people for antibodies to see if they've had COVID or if they're currently having natural immunity. But then I thought, wait, what happens when you get sick? For a while, you have the antibodies, but then when you get well, those particular codes or antibodies go into the lymph nodes, the bone marrow, and it's sort of your body's memory. So you can still have that natural resistance, but it's kind of hiding out. It's not always going to be in your bloodstream. Am I on track here with my thinking about that?
You are. And as a matter of fact, we use a test here called the COVID-19 anti-spike protein test. We have it's a blood test, real simple, and it should be done everywhere. It's like, so you can, and I've seen this actually in this case, because of the perpetual appearance of and probably endemic nature of the COVID-19 and its variants, I have seen anti-spike antibodies hang around in a non-vaccinated person for up to a year. Isn't that crazy? And I've seen that in the blood. And it's not like high levels, but it's there, and you can quantify it now, which is good. But it just shows you the ability of the body to remember. And you're right. Yeah. It's like when I'm in the gym working out, back to that analogy to really make your point well received by the audience. I don't do bench press every day. You're not going to see me doing bench press every day. You might see me doing bench press once a week or once every couple of weeks. The same is true. When I go by that bar and I see that bar, my body remembers what to do, and all of a sudden goes into the I'm going to bench press mode. But when I'm doing a lat pull down on another day, I'm not thinking about bench press, nor is my body thinking about that.
Yeah.
So the body develops all this ability to remember the environment and deal with it. And deal with it because that's God's intent, man. I mean, we were supposed to live with it, live in it, and yet now we're scared of it. It's the most bizarre switch of ideology that I think I've ever experienced in my adult life.
It really is, and I saw it particularly from people like Fauci as being very dishonest, because I do believe they know the truth, and I think they're peddling something for money. And a lot of people do believe there are control issues there. And when you look at things that have come out of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, some others' mouths, I think there is reason to be concerned, because there is a desire to control people there. And it's not even, I would have thought a few years ago, oh, that's conspiracy theory stuff. I had friends talk about globalists, and I was like, oh, come on, please. It's right out there now. You can find it easily. They're not even hiding it anymore. So I don't believe everybody who advocated for vaccines or I think a lot of people did their best, and even doctors sometimes are just, they're very busy. They don't have the chance to study up on things. They kind of just do whatever they're told they're supposed to be doing. But there is cause for concern. There are very evil people in this world. Like they say, never let a good crisis go. Or wasted. Never waste a good crisis. Something like that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. You look back, the globalist mentality. You go back and look at Adolf Hitler. Same type of deal. He wanted to control things. Anytime you see a tyrant, leader that wants to dominate the world, it's the same mentality. You go back and look at King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon way back here. You can go back historically. This idea of trying to control with influence and power and money has been around since the beginning of time. And so, and I will say this, I think this is an important point. Any of us, you, me, if we're honest, we are susceptible to the temptation of that too. And we need to be really careful and stay humble and stay with a heart of humility, because all of us are subject to that type of fall. And it breaks my heart to see good men and women falling for that. And I don't hate them. I don't like what they do at all. I can even say I hate what they do, but I don't hate them as people. And I can only hope that at some point in time, that in the conservative movement, that we will separate the evilness from the person, be aware of evil, love the person anyway, in a way that's not giving into that, right? And that is the kind of approach we need to have, because in the end, good wins. Light is more powerful than darkness. And I know it's getting crazy out in the world right now. I get it, but I'm not concerned, because I know the end of the book. I know the story. The game. So it's like we need to think differently about things, I think.
Yeah. I wrote an article in one of our Freedom Talk issues called How to Murder Millions. And I had studied the Warsaw Ghetto, the gulags of the Soviet Union, different things where these mass murders happened. And it was interesting, because the justification for herding the Jews of Warsaw, Poland into this walled ghetto was typhus. Typhus is everywhere. It's for your own protection, and this disease has been used as a justification for tyranny and even genocide.
Yes.
For a long time. So it's, I don't think it's unreasonable to look at something like this and say, hey, there could be abuse here. There could be people using this. And I think there's some evidence of that too, of at least the intent. You see China still locking people down. You see people trying to get back their lives in China being brutally repressed for simply wanting to have a life.
Yeah, it's very sad, isn't it? It's communism, socialism 101. To control the population, you have an elitist class, the monarchs, and you have the peasants or the little followers that just they don't have rights, they have privileges. And even when you talk about China, this is how the elitists in America have done this. They've outsourced all their product production to that communist country called China, so that the communist leaders in China can get rich, and the people that are oppressed are actually working like slaves to create the goods and services that we in America are buying, and we think is a good deal. And we have got to stop the madness and begin to see the connected dots and stop participating and realize who's who. So, I'm a big believer in buy American, make American, that kind of thing, because we don't need to feed communism. Because to your point, the same people that are complaining about the way they're treated over there are actually feeding the people that are treating them that way. And so it's this whole thing is going to require an incredible mind shift switch. And that's why I really encourage people to listen to Real Freedom Talk and narratives like this, because it gives you the idea to get a well-rounded journalistic three sides of the two-sided coin story, if you will.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I appreciate it. I chose as a tagline, think again. And it's kind of a double entendre, because we need to learn to think again, but we also need to think again about things that we're being told. And there are so many people, often they're young people, but it's older people too, who are so enthralled by socialism. It's hard to talk them out of it. But, I had a coffee shop for a while, and people would come in who had been under communism in Vietnam. We had a woman, wonderful woman. She passed away recently, but she wrote a book called Born to War. I would check that out on Amazon. It's a great book. Krista Reynolds, she was a child in Nazi Germany, and then under the Soviets, under the Berlin airlift. And she said, look, what I'm seeing now, it scares me, because it's very much like, it's almost exactly like what I experienced before the Nazis took over, and what I experienced under communism. So I hope at least a few people out there who've been indoctrinated with this idea will listen to the people who've been through it. It's very hard, especially with young people. I have 5 kids. They reach a certain age, and it's hard to get through, because they, sophomore means wise fool, right? They get a little bit of knowledge, and it's a dangerous thing. I am seeing people, though, who've really been caught up in that. I mean, some people came to my shop who had been in the anti-Trump and BLM marches and everything, and suddenly woke up and realized, hey, there's some hatred in these movements. And they met people like me who sometimes suffer from different labels, even though I've never really until now been very political. But they start realizing there's something really wrong with Marxism. They start to see behind the curtain. I'm encouraged by that.
Me too. And I'm encouraged about, like in America, we still have, there's probably 80 million people right now or more that really understand the gift we have of the Constitutional Republic. They really do. They get that. And they have their guns, they have their freedoms that they don't want to be messed with. And they love people until you mess with their family, and so we're at a place in time where I'm encouraged too, because there's still a bunch of people out there, and they're being, reawakened again, if you pardon that expression, so that they understand the gifts we have, and they're willing to protect those things with their life if need be. And that's the beauty of our country. And I think there's high hopes for these United States. To ever think we'll be the United States again? I don't. I really don't. But will we be states? Will there be some states that actually are going to hang on to that idea? I think there will be. I'm hoping that we'll get the right governors and the right sheriffs in there that really instill those values, because it's going to take that. We'll push back against the tyranny that is even our federal government, right? I'm talking both sides of the aisle. I'm talking the uniparty system that tries to control everybody by money. I'm hoping the states and the people push back. And I believe that the opportunity is out there for us, Kelly. It's just going to be continue to push grassroots and continue to become hope dealers for the world.
Yeah. And I think it's so important for people to get involved, even if they don't, quote, have a dog in the fight. Hey, it's not my job on the line. It's not my kid's school that this is happening at. Get involved, because eventually it's going to come for you. But, as to this question about the future of this nation, for a long time, I've been thinking in terms of, well, all our wars have been external. We haven't had the enemy inside. And then I started looking deeper and got on a kick to look into the American Revolution. And I realized we have been here before.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't like everybody in America in 1776 unanimously said, yeah, let's kick out the British. You had loyalists, you had British in the country who were hunting down patriots. You had times where the war wasn't going so well and people turned their backs. You had Benedict Arnold. You had all these things going on. So we had a very deeply divided society. Can we unite again? I hope and pray so. Are we going? Yes, good is going to win. But my question is this going to be in this life or the next? Where are we going? Is this the collapse of the age of man? Do we have more time? I know that gets into theology, but gosh, may you never live in interesting times, right?
Yeah, I think that this world is always and has always been full of evil. It is, and it's sort of temporarily suspended in this control of evil right now for a time, I believe. Now, while we're here, I look at it like this: the people that are here that are carrying the flag of patriotism and carrying the flag of freedom, and even carrying the flag of God, true relationship with God in this world. We're here for a reason, and we're here for a reason to spread that hope. And as long as we're here, there is hope. As long as Kelly Walker's here, there's hope. As long as Mark Sherwood here, there's hope. And I think hope is always going to be around as long as we hang on to it and recognize it. And it's going to take some special human beings to step up, much like back in 1776. And remember, there was only 56 people that signed the Declaration of Independence. It wasn't 5 million. There wasn't even 5 million here. It was 56 people. But
yeah.
Than that now.
And they had to almost drag a few of them across the finish line, try to talk them into doing it. And a couple people stayed home because they knew they couldn't sign it, but they didn't want to interfere. I mean, it wasn't a given. It was the likelihood of this country coming out the way it did. My gosh, I think it had to be some divine help there.
I agree with you.
We were up against huge odds, but I want to tell you that really resonates with me, what you said. As long as there are people in this country who love the country, there's always hope. Mm-hmm. And even back when everything was locked down, everyone was scared. You were hearing stories about people being monitored by drones, all of these things. I realized we're going to need to come to a time where we re-educate people. We renew a love for our country. We tell the truth that the founders weren't perfect, but that they set something in motion that has allowed us all to enjoy the freest country on earth. And that we shouldn't throw that out because it's not perfect. We should keep building it. And it really, it breaks my heart to see people trashing their own country and acting as if this is the most evil empire that ever existed, when in fact, this country and England, the Anglosphere, you might say, were the ones that did away with slavery, which had been ubiquitous. Everybody was doing slavery over time. And just to overlook the great things that this country was built upon. Not perfectly, we've grown, we've progressed, but we got to hold on to this. It's a good country, and I hope it can come back together again.
Amen. And people are still wanting to come here. I mean, I look at the immigration problem as a problem, but I also look at it as, why do many of those people want to come here? The majority of them want to come here for an opportunity that we have right now. And I can appreciate that. Do I want them to come in right? Yes. But I look at the big picture. Why are people still wanting to come to America? Mm-hmm. Just what you said.
Yeah, and it pains me for people to say we're not free anymore, our rights are gone, and all of these things, because those things can live in our hearts. And I've been defiant, and maybe a little too much. I've been arrested twice. One of them was a false arrest and dismissed. Another one I'm in the middle of defending. Haven't ever done anything violent, haven't done anything wrong. But they don't like it when you stand up. They don't like it when you tell the truth. But I have to say, freedom lives as long as you stand up for your natural rights. And I'm not expecting everybody to go out and get arrested or have big confrontations. But I want to encourage people, push your boundaries, learn to say no, learn to go to your school board and say, this isn't appropriate. I'm not going to have drag queen shows at my kids' school. Why do they want an audience of children? Tell me that, If you want to go see a drag queen show, go to a club or something. But, people have to find that courage. They have to get involved and start stepping forward and have a little bit of courage, or this country is lost.
Yes.
But I hope, I know you're a strong person. I know a lot of strong people. I hope the strong people who are really standing up, Carrie Lake, um, Eli Crane, Blake Masters, a lot of people, and these are people in our state,
Yeah.
they're really stepping forward boldly. So find your boldness, find your courage. I think that's something they could talk to you about, because you're a motivational speaker.
Yeah.
You can encourage people and help them to push their boundaries a little bit. So,
Well, I agree with you, and I think that people need to understand the power of courage really goes and grows from encouragement, which is when a courageous person gives another person the permission to be courageous, which is the art of encouraging. And so the more that's done, the more that can become infectious. And I really hope that the new contagion is encouragement for people. And if we grasp a hold of that, Kelly, that's how we rearrange and regain this idea of freedom in the constitutional republic that which we stand and sit in right now. It's still here. It's still here in our hearts. It's still here on paper through the Constitution, even though there's people that want to change it. But my goodness, let's use the courage we have to grow. And again, tests come like weights, we adapt that courage. Let's adapt that courage, but go give it away to somebody else. And that's the key to change.
yeah, absolutely. Dr. Mark Sherwood, thank you so much. We're coming up on an hour. I think you and I could talk
Yeah,
hours, and we'll have to do this again. But
for sure.
thank you for your insights. Really appreciate it. I think there's something of value. People can go to linktapgo.com at the bottom of the screen here, right there, and they can watch the video or they can listen to the podcast. And thanks for being willing to share this as well. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, my friend. Have a good rest of the day. Thanks so much.
Sure.